Hello. In this video, I'm going to talk about broccoli, which should be available locally in Central PA soon, if not already. Broccoli actually has two seasons in Central Pennsylvania, late May, June, and then again in the fall. So it should be starting up again soon. I'll cover several topics related to broccoli. I won't actually do any cooking today, but I will offer a couple of recipe ideas as well as some other suggestions for things you might look for and try. And I'll also talk about how to select and store broccoli, how to wash it and prep it and freeze it for longer term storage, since I like to take what's available locally and prep it to freeze it if possible. In order to keep my food as local as possible, I like to share that with you so that you can do the same if you'd like. It helps to give the business to the local farmers and farmers markets, and it also makes things more nutritious for those of us who are eating the food, because the less distance it has to travel, the less time it has to lose nutrients once it's been picked. So when you're selecting broccoli at the farmer's market or the grocery store, you want to try to find broccoli that is a darker green, because that means that it's better ripened. When it's turning yellow, it isn't turning bad, but it is starting to lose chlorophylls, which give it that dark green color and make it nutritious as well. So if it's turning yellow, then you can still eat it, but you want to cook it as soon as possible. And I'll offer a couple of suggestions of what to do besides just cooking to eat immediately. If it has black or brown spots, you want to remove those before you even start doing anything with it. Just cut those right off and keep the parts that are green or yellow. You can see here in this slide, the broccoli on the left side of the slide is actually, I got it for half price from a local merchant because it was in urgent need of being used. You can see that it's got brown spots. So I cut off those brown spots and I washed and immediately blanched the rest of it and froze it. The picture on the right is much better. There are a few small yellow spots here and there and some more underneath, but for the most part, it's that nice, colorful, nutritious green that we want when we want good broccoli. Once you get your broccoli, several things to keep in mind. Broccoli is one of those vegetables that is better stored in moisture. So rather than storing it in plastic, put it in a moist towel. You can use a paper towel if you'd like, or you can use a tea towel, anything at all that will give it just a little bit of dampness, and store it in the crisper drawer, but don't keep it very long. Some produce keeps a long time in the refrigerator. Broccoli, within 2 or 3 days, if you don't do something with it, it will start to lose its nutrition. So what to do if you are ready to use it in one way or another? When it comes to washing, broccoli is definitely one of those kinds of produce that you want to chop up and then soak in a solution of vinegar and water. It's enough probably to do, you could do half and half, 50% vinegar, 50% water, but you could probably even just do several tablespoons of vinegar in enough water to soak your chopped broccoli, because the vinegar will help to lift anything that might be in those hard to find spaces in the broccoli spears. So soak for at least 2 to 3 minutes, not just a very quick rinse, and then rinse it for at least 30 seconds under cold water, and it should be ready to use. You don't want to freeze broccoli raw. You want to at least blanch it and freeze it for later, or else go ahead and cook it and have it ready to use so that you can pull it right out and just quickly heat up, maybe even just in the microwave. If you want to blanch it, the instructions are here. I have talked about blanching in other videos. The main thing to know about blanching is that it does not fully cook your food, but it cooks it enough that any deterioration that might happen if you froze it raw is stopped, which means that those vegetables that tend to turn bitter when you freeze them raw are not going to do so if you blanch them. The other thing to think about with blanching is the amount of time you blanch really depends on how thick the vegetable is that you're blanching. So thicker vegetables like potatoes or Brussels sprouts or larger pieces of broccoli would be blanched for closer to 5 minutes. Something smaller, if you cut your broccoli into very small pieces, you probably only need to do 3 minutes. It really depends. Use your best judgment, and then for however long you boil it or steam it, you want to put it in a cold water bath for that amount of time as well to stop the cooking process. And then just pat it dry, and you can go ahead and freeze it if you're ready to store it for later. You can also cook, and I've got some recipes, since plenty of them would be freezable as well if you want to make your own meals to have to pull out later. Couple of things to think about with broccoli. I already mentioned that raw broccoli, if it's turning yellow, is losing the chlorophyll, which is a sign that it's losing some of its healthy nutrients, because chlorophylls not only give broccoli their color, they also give broccoli antioxidants and other nutrients that are great for your heart and great for your immune system. So doing a few things to help preserve those chlorophylls as much as possible is always recommended. And you could go through a long and extensive process trying to keep as many chlorophylls as possible in it. Main things to keep in mind. One thing is that, yes, raw broccoli that is really green is going to have the most amount of chlorophylls of any variety. That having been said, many people have problems digesting raw broccoli. And if that's the case, you are better off cooking it. The bottom line is, however you can eat it, whatever makes it appealing to you, eat it, because it's going to be nutritious no matter what. But if you're interested in trying to preserve as much nutrition as possible, these are some things you can do and think about. Broccoli, they did a study and found that broccoli, actually, if you chop it and let it rest after you've chopped it for actually 90 minutes, seems to be the optimal amount of time for broccoli to rest before cooking if you want to preserve the chlorophyll. But even 30 minutes is enough. So if you've got other things you're doing, you could wash and chop your broccoli first, set that aside and let it rest, and then come back to it when you're ready to cook it. But any amount of time you let it rest after you chop it is better than nothing, because it will start to deteriorate faster if you go ahead and cook it immediately after chopping. Another thing to think about is that if you can't do that and take all that time, you can add a pinch of baking soda when you're blanching, steaming, or boiling, because this will help to lock in the nutrients and the color as well. You can cook it just for about 5 to 7 minutes. Once it's cooked for longer than that, it tends to start to lose the chlorophylls, and it can turn a kind of grayish color. But if you do put that pinch of baking soda in, you can sustain it for a little longer and boil it the full time, or steam it the full time if you need to. And then cooking in water actually helps to retain the chlorophylls more than cooking in oil. That having been said, despite the fact that oil causes broccoli to lose some of its nutrients, that sauteing and stir frying, or even roasting or grilling with a little bit of an oil marinade is often the most appealing thing for many people, including for me. So most of the time I end up stir frying my broccoli, or I roast it with a little olive oil and some seasonings. And if that's the way you like it, you're still getting your nutrition. It's still a really healthy food for you to eat. But these are some things to think about if you'd like to try to lock in a few more of those nutrients. So those are the things to think about when you're choosing and prepping your broccoli. And now I'm going to offer a couple of recipes that I really like. I hope to offer some recipes in these videos that you maybe haven't tried before, some things you haven't thought about that might be new to you. And then I will give you some other suggestions of what you might do with things that you really like that you already eat, that you can add broccoli to. And you can, of course, look around and find other recipes as well. So one thing that I really like is hot and sour soup. And if you don't like really hot foods, that's okay. This can actually be tempered to your own preferred heat level by adjusting the amount of pepper that you put in the soup. And you can vary the vegetables that go in it. You can vary the protein that goes in it, or you can skip a protein completely if you want this to be just a kind of first course. Something like this can be a nice first course instead of salad on a cold day when you're looking for something to add some vegetables to your meal. The recipe is here. It's fairly straightforward if you are used to making soup, so I won't go through all of the demonstration. I did make some over the weekend and I can show you what it looks like. A couple of things I would say though, you can use lime juice or tamarind paste. That's what gives it the sour part of the flavor. And obviously peppers are what give it the hot amount of flavor, the hot part. So you can include a chili or you can omit it. You can choose something that is really mild in flavor if you'd like a New Mexico chili or shishito peppers. These kinds of chilies are really mild flavored, or you can go for something hotter like cayenne. Know what kind of pepper you're using, or you can just add a pinch of something like dried cayenne pepper if you prefer that. And then it calls for black and white pepper. White pepper is optional. You want to at least use some black pepper because otherwise it's not really a hot and sour soup, but at least a little bit of black pepper to give it some heat. But white pepper will also increase the heat because I find that white pepper tends to be actually just a little bit hotter than black pepper. It's a bit more refined, which means that it seems that the heat of the pepper gets to come out more fully when it's more refined. So use some or don't use some, depending on whether or not you like hot food, but that's a way for you to add some heat if it's not quite hot enough. And then you want 4 to 6 cups of chopped vegetables. This time of year is a great time to make this kind of soup, and I like to freeze some of it for later because we're going to find broccoli in season, peppers are still in season, and East Asian cuisines love fresh peppers and things, right? So this is a great time of year for something like this, but it's also, you might find cooler days as well. And you might even find some good local tomatoes at this point, and you could substitute those instead of a can of tomatoes. And then I usually do tofu in my hot and sour soup, but you can do a grilled chicken or some grilled pork if you'd prefer. Just make sure that you grill whatever protein you're using first, and then add it after you have added most of the ingredients and before you go ahead and serve. So I will show you what this looks like. This is the batch of hot and sour soup that I made over the weekend. I loaded it up because I did put tofu in it. If you skip the protein, you're going to find that you'll have a bit brothier soup, which is fine too, depending on what you're interested in making. But because I added the protein as well, I ended up with a brothy soup, but not as much liquid. There's definitely a lot to chew on in this, which is what I wanted because it makes a whole meal for me since there's protein and veggies. I'll just say one other thing and then I will share the other recipe. And that is that the recipe calls for lime juice or tamarind paste. If you don't have either of those, you could substitute lemon juice. I would caution you though that lime juice is more tart than lemon juice, so you are not going to get quite as much of the sour part of the flavor if you do lemon juice instead of lime for this. So it could be worth it to get some lime juice if you don't have any, or get a lime and juice it, depending on your preference, if you're not going to use lime for anything else, or if you'll use some whole lime. I do recommend, it does give it a bit more sour flavor than a lemon would. The other recipe is also East Asian, and it also calls for some vegetables that are easy to get right now locally, more peppers, more broccoli, and you can get potatoes now as well. You can also get a variety of leafy greens. So it's pretty easy to find some things locally if you'd like to go entirely local for your produce for this. And this is another recipe where you can go for protein or not. It's a vegetable curry, so it doesn't have to have a protein in it. You could serve a different kind of protein on the side if you'd like some grilled fish, but you can also make this a one dish meal, which is what I like to do. And then you can grill your chicken or your tofu on the side and add it in before you add in your leafy greens. And I've included that in the directions. So the main thing I would say about this recipe, if you are used to making stir fries and those kinds of dishes, this is a similar kind of concept. The main thing is that it calls for you to, after you saute some onion, garlic, ginger, and maybe a chili in some olive oil or other vegetable oil, it calls for you to add some red curry paste because it is a Thai recipe. You can use yellow curry. Yellow curries are found in Thai recipes as well, so that's a fine substitute if you don't have red curry paste and don't want to go looking for any or can't find any. But if you want to try to be more traditional, you can get red curry paste in the grocery store. It's not that hard to find nowadays. Another option is that you can, if you have some of your own curry powder, you can just put curry powder in it by itself at that point in the process and cook it for a couple of minutes to release the flavors of the curry powder. It will be a similar kind of flavor. But I do want to say one thing, and I will go to the next slide. If you don't have curry paste or don't want to invest in any, you can make your own if you have curry powder. You just need to mix equal parts curry powder and either vinegar or lime juice. You probably could substitute lemon juice, and that would be better than nothing, better than just putting curry powder in. But the citrus juices and the vinegars are great flavor enhancers. So I do recommend that if you don't have a paste ready to go, that you make your own. It's an extra minute or two in the whole process of cooking. And you can use any kind of vinegar you like. I normally use rice vinegar because that's traditional for East Asian foods, but you could use a white wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, or just plain white vinegar if you'd like. Any of those would be fine, or a lemon or a lime juice. They will just help to bring out the flavors, not only of the spices, but of everything else. So this is a dish that you can serve. It would be served with rice. So cook yourself some rice and add some protein to it, or have a different protein on the side if you'd like. There are a lot of options. You can try different vegetables with it at different times of the year. If I make it in the winter when peppers are not in season fresh, I will often just do other things and skip the peppers. You can just add some carrots, for example. Those would work and give you maybe a different kind of flavor, but you're going to get some nutrition. You can do a lot of things with it. So those are a couple of recipes that I really like, and you can adjust the flavors by increasing or decreasing the amount of peppers that you use. You can also try broccoli with a lot of different things. Any soup that you make, you can probably try putting it in if you'd like to have a vegetable. You can add it to your fried rice when you're cooking it, and to other stir fries. You can put it on your pizzas. You can add it to pasta dishes. You can add it to omelets and frittatas, or to a pot pie or a meat pie, depending on what you call that thing that is in a pie shell that you bake in the oven with vegetables and probably a broth or a gravy and maybe some meat. you can try broccoli with a lot of things, and there are lots of cookbooks you can borrow from the library and plenty of recipes you can find online. I hope that there have been some suggestions here that are helpful for you and that you're able to enjoy some local broccoli while it's in season.